You're listening to the Love Your Neighbor podcast.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us on the Links podcast. My name is John, and today we're joined by a special guest, Bob Logan. Bob, thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah. Well, you've been on the list, and we're excited to finally get you here. And this season is sponsored by Brandon Wellness. We are a nonprofit organization, and our goal is to build and invest in the health and wellness of our community. And we're talking about that during this season. And Bob, you've been a part of this community. How long have you been a Brandon resident, been a part of Brandon?
Well, we brought our family here in 1993.
Okay.
So almost 30 years coming up next April. I kid people, when we came in, I think we had 12 inches of rain in that April timeframe. And when we came to look at a house, it looked like they had a lake outside of town. And the Big Sioux was just, looked like so we thought we were getting a bonus there with the big lake, but it did go away. But it's been a great 30 years, almost next April.
So at that time, your family, kids, were they young, school-aged, or where were they at in school?
Paul was a second grader, and we actually, on purpose, came to the last week of school so he could meet some friends there. And so Molly was just going to start kindergarten, and Mariah was just a baby. So, we were a very, very young family then, like families are today. Mm-hmm. And now I would say that we are a little bit of an older family in Brandon. But, it's been a great 30 years, and lived down on Fifth Avenue, 2 blocks from every school. And it was just, we're small-town people, so it just fit.
Okay. So you and your wife, you obviously moved here from somewhere. Were you in Sioux Falls, or where were you?
We were actually in Sioux City.
Okay.
Worked for a furniture store down there for many years, and got a new position up here, and we moved from Sioux City up to Brandon. And I grew up in Agar, small town, 100 people. Wanda grew up in Kaler. Not many people know where either one of those are, but that's over by Scotland, South Dakota, and a town of 100.
Okay.
Agar had a water tower. Kaler did not, so that's my up on Wanda. But so we're small town people. Brandon was really a comfortable fit. 1993, people don't remember, not many houses for sale. Looked at one over by Lincoln High, one down at Harrisburg, and we were just really comfortable with Brandon and the size of 2,412 people at that year that we moved here. So seen a lot of changes.
You've seen more than 5-fold growth then in 30 years. Wow.
It doesn't feel different, though.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, other than going into sunshine and maybe not knowing everybody, but it seems like it's still a small town to us.
Yeah, that's been a huge part. For me, we've lived in Brandon for 7 years, but at that point where you see people at at school activities, you see people at the grocery store, you see them at Ace, and almost invariably you'll see somebody and recognize and say hi. And, that makes Brandon special. How tell us a little bit, Bob, about how your role within the community. Everybody has a role, but you have kind of a unique role. Tell us a little bit about the role you play within the Brandon community and how you got to be in that role.
Well, not everybody wants to be a public address announcer. For many years, actually, I traveled, so I was really on the road from Monday through Friday. So I was kind of a weekend guy here. But not everybody wants to be a public address announcer. And I remember, like in 1994, the athletic director at that time, Rick, called me and heard that I did public address announcing. That's how I started, I guess, my commitment to athletics in Brandon Valley is to do track and field. So I've been doing that for about 30 years. And I refereed for many years, so I wasn't here. And I really missed seeing the events, and a lot of my friends had kids playing, but I was not able to watch them. And then when my kids got into school, then I just decided to quit the officiating, and then started doing the public address announcing. And I've been, I think, football for 21 years and other sports, when somebody had left or retired, But I love all kinds of sports. I'm kind of a basketball guy. But football in Brandon Valley, you can't top it, especially when everybody, if you think of it, everybody's looking away from me when I'm doing public address announcing, so I'm a little more comfortable there. But, a few weeks ago, Pigskin, you just can't get a better night than that in athletics. So that's, and I've done some other things as far as volunteering and community foundation, which is awesome, and chamber things, but it's sports thing is really great to be around. You're always watching younger people, so you seem younger.
Yeah, it keeps you young, right? Yeah. You're watching them. And
yes.
You've obviously, for 30 years, I got 2 questions. Do you remember a name when you saw it on the sheet where you're like, how am I going to say this name? Do you have some of those moments?
Well, Brandon, I always really did pretty good because I knew every name. But today they're not hard names, I would say. But some of the first names are harder than the second names for some reason. But lots of different spellings, like for Mariah, they're just different. But it takes time to, the one thing I want to do is get names right. I don't want somebody to come up and say, it's this. And football's hard because you got a lot of names to look at, calling the other schools and talking to the secretaries, athletic directors, trying to get names correct. But Brandon's always getting a little bit more difficult. In the booth at football, I used to have Dean Pearson up there, and he was a teacher. If I had trouble with a name, he could tell me. And he's not teaching anymore, not up in the booth. But it's just it's hard sometimes. Track and field is very difficult because you got a lot of names. You got diverse, groups that have moved here, Washington or Roosevelt, and super athletes, but it's, a lot of times the coaches don't know how to pronounce them. They'll just say we call him Sammy, and that's what you go with. But it takes some time to get, and I want to get it right because the last thing you want to do is get a name wrong that's fairly easy for them to pronounce. But basketball is pretty simple because you got 10, 12 names.
Sure. Yeah, I can imagine track with multiple teams, multiple schools, areas. Wow, what a challenge that would be. And you say a lot of names. I mean, you list all the place winners, when they finish. Right. All of that, it's quite a process. I mean, I go to them, that kind of becomes part of the environment to hear because you're really leading the fans. Hey, this is next. This is who won. I mean, and they're leaning on you very heavily. It's a complicated job,
Right. The last thing you want to do is have fans go home and talk about the public address announcer. You want to be somewhat invisible, just like a referee, and anytime that you can do that and give them information, correct information is really important. And I take very seriously in working and representing Brandon Valley Athletics. So that is my key. It's like music. I do all the music, and I think Mr. Frecky now is getting some music, bought a music service, which is great. You have to have correct music. You can't have music with any type of words that the student athlete shouldn't hear, fans shouldn't hear. So, you listen to a song, it's like, that is a great song, and then it's not a great song. So it's, I put a little Christian music in there. It's great music. It's clean music. But that's the other thing is you really have to be careful. Mr. Marshall was very determined that music was going to be good music.
Yeah, it's part of creating an environment. Having been an athlete myself, that those songs, those words that come from the PA they become part of the event. Right. They really do. So, well, thank you for that. Tell us also, you also have a role within the chamber. Talk about that in the chamber for people that are listening and that don't know what the chamber is. Talk a little bit about what that entails.
Well, I have the honor this year of leading the chamber. I'm the chair. And I always tell people that, school along with strong economic Main Street is important for a town. And we have a couple Rachels in our office that do a phenomenal job, and attaboys and girls to our chamber members who volunteer on committees. But we try to get people really to buy local, and that's what we work on every day. And our sales tax numbers have been awesome. But that just puts money. The money stays local, and it just helps everybody. We have so many people. So many baseball teams, football teams that want sponsors, and anytime you can buy local, keep some money in there, and they can do those things for our teams. But we have some strong committees, and if you notice around Brandon, a lot of dirt being moved, so there's things are really going good in Brandon.
What do sales tax dollars? How do they, besides supporting our local businesses, how do the sales tax dollars help out the city for somebody that's new to Brandon? Maybe they've just moved here in the last couple of years. Why is sales tax so important, and why do we want to keep it, not just to grow local businesses, but also to support our community?
Well, there's certain parts of the tax that will go to streets, roads, like we've seen a lot of where we used to live in Fifth Avenue down in, I would say, the older part of town. All those streets are new, sidewalks, parks, things like that. So anytime you can spend additional dollars, it helps with the city budget and some things that they can do. Our ballpark, our baseball, softball complex, you can see that where they can just do different things. The water, the water addition is going to be a great thing. So anytime you spend dollars in there, the city will have additional dollars to do those projects. And that's how you keep Brandon going. And other than the merchants, then they have additional dollars to do, good things in our community.
What are some new businesses? You correctly, we see a lot of things happening. Coming into the end of 2022 here, what are some of the businesses that people are going to start seeing that you're most excited about at the chamber? What are some of the new businesses that we can be looking for?
Well, everybody likes ice cream, so Dairy Queen's coming there. It's going up fast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great get.
We're getting another restaurant that's going to open next week, I think, right beside Arby's there. Pours and Plates, I think it's going to be called.
The Gruff, I think that's...
The Gruff, yeah.
Yep.
Things like that, I think, that will help bring people in town. As you drive out, of town on Rice Street, there's just going to be a huge development out there. Mm-hmm. Another grocery store is coming to town, and Dr. K is building his new clinic out there, and there's going to be another convenience store there. One of my favorite when you go to Minnesota, see a lot of those. I'm trying to think of the name of it right now, but
Quick Trip. Right?
Quick Trip.
Yep.
Great cinnamon rolls, and and just the housing that's going to be out there. But the whole Sioux Empire is just growing very fast, and
yeah, I think and the chamber has had Paul Tenhanken as a guest speaker, and one of the things that we're trying to understand in this new world, of how South Dakota, specifically the Sioux Empire, is growing, and we're really becoming an area. Brandon is a unique part of a larger, what's becoming a metro area. Over now. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the total population is, but we've got to be pushing 250,000 people, that call the Sioux Falls area home. And we're a part of that. We've been certainly blessed by that. And in some ways, there are some certain limitations, but, Sioux Falls, this is the Love Your Neighbor podcast.
Right.
Sioux Falls is our neighbor.
Right.
And we're their neighbor. And so we realize that what's good for Sioux Falls, and a lot of times is good for us. And building that mindset is important. What would you say to those folks like yourself that have been around Brandon a long time, that are probably listening, they probably know you, their kids probably went to school with your kids, and they're struggling with, wow, everything's changing. What would you say to someone that's maybe think it's too much too fast?
I think most of them know, it's interesting because a lot of our friends have kids in our town now, which is kind of unique. They have not moved away, which is awesome. We have a couple grandkids by Fred Assam. And I know a lot of our friends have kids that live in the Brandon community. So I think they get it. I think that we have set a priority, or I'm not sure what the right word is, but we have developed a town that people want to go to. So it's probably our fault in a way, but it's a good fault.
Let's blame Harry Buck. How about that?
Yeah, there you go.
It's Harry's fault.
Right. We have developed a community that people want to come to, and I think we got to be proud of that. And I think that we are, and it's interesting to see, there's lots of folks now that are retiring, that are in my age or in, our friends. And I hope that they don't think it's troublesome that we're growing, because we do have more things to do. And honestly, the town to me, has not changed that much. I think our crime rate is still low. It is low. And, but for someone like me who's going to sell a house in a few years, it's a really good thing, and we probably won't move out of Brandon, but it's just, economically, it's just really increased. So I think in most cases, people are pretty happy still with the growth. And
good.
So
I just want to, in closing, just kind of get your ideas. We've talked, the Chamber has been very supportive of the Brandon Wellness movement. What would you say a wellness center, accessible to all people in our community, with a membership, what would that mean, do you believe, to a community like Brandon over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think we've talked about this. My kids, our middle one, Molly, lives in Watertown, and I've seen that facility. They're a bigger city, but I think it would give everybody from my age to youth something to do and something to keep physically fit and well-being mind-wise. I think it would be awesome. It would attract more people, I think, to our community. But for a facility like that, to me, it would be awesome to have in our community, and it would help our community in many different ways. Realistic, it would.
Yeah, and I'm just so encouraged by the leadership in our city that said, "Hey, we're going to make this a priority. We can't write a check for this, but we're going to do everything we can to make this happen." And the Chamber's a big part of that, as well as our park board and the many people who serve our community have really been supportive of this. So, Bob, thank you for being on the Links podcast. Want to encourage you, if you're watching and you know Bob, go ahead and take this episode, share it on Facebook, share it on YouTube. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We'd love to have you share the message. And if you know somebody that doesn't know Bob, if there is anybody in Brandon that doesn't know Bob, share this with them. And next time you're at a game or a track meet, you'll put a face to the voice. And really appreciate you, Bob. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, John.
Thank you for joining us on the Love Your Neighbor podcast. The purpose of the Love Your Neighbor podcast is to build community one conversation at a time. You can help us build that community by sharing the podcast on your social media channels and rating our podcast on whatever platform you're listening from. Another way is to let us know of any neighbors who have a story. Go Leaks!